In 2022, Hollywood's domestic box office was $7.3 billion. The U.S. music industry did $15.9 billion in revenue last year. Worldwide, sports fans spent just over $27 billion buying tickets to live events in 2022. But there's another entertainment medium that makes those numbers look paltry. An industry that did $235 billion in revenue last year alone. We're talking about video games. 6 of the top 20 best-selling video games in 2022 were sports titles, and 2 of the top 7 are produced by Electronic Arts. Ray Almeda, the global PR lead for the EA Sports portfolio, is my guest on Media Credentials.
I demand satisfaction.
My name is Whit Watson, and this is Media Credentials. I'm a sports announcer who's worked a lot of places. This podcast will peel back the layers of sports media and show you how the sausage gets made. Through interviews with industry pros and my own experience, you'll understand why you're seeing what you're seeing and who's responsible for it. Your Media Credentials have been approved. As you heard in the open, the numbers for gaming are staggering. Revenues are expected to hit $321 billion by 2026. It's estimated that there are just over 3 billion active gamers worldwide. Electronic Arts, EA, was founded in California in 1982 by an Apple employee named Trip Hawkins. The company produces 2 of the best-selling sports titles of all time, EA Sports FC, which used to be called FIFA, and the legendary Madden NFL game. This year, EA introduced several new sports titles, including a new PGA Tour game that, for the first time, includes all 4 major championships. It all keeps Ray Almeda very busy. We talked about his job, his path, the mind-bending technology behind the games, and where the business is going. Ray, thanks a lot for coming on. You are a busy man these days. We were just talking offline. It seems like every week now you're releasing a new game from EA Sports. How are you holding up?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Whit. Yeah, I mean, I like to think of it as a marathon. It isn't exactly a small sprint and kind of doing everything as much as you can. With a lot of the games that come out these days, the launch doesn't necessarily mean your work is done and you get to just sit and relax. We update our games pretty often, especially in the world of sports, and that's what keeps people coming back. That's what keeps things fresh, and that's what keeps things relevant for the real life sport as well. So yeah, super excited about it. Just recently released EA Sports NHL 24 and UFC 5 a couple weeks ago, and I'm glad that a good amount of our players are really enjoying it so far.
Tell me what your role is, an overview of your position at Electronic Arts.
Yeah, so I'm the global PR lead, public relations lead for the EA Sports portfolio. I manage a lot of global execution strategy, a lot of tactical work around making sure press and to some degree high-level influencers have a chance to play your game early, get excited about it, have a chance to review a game when it comes out, and provide them also access to our developers, celebrities, brand ambassadors, to make sure that they can get all the different pieces of the puzzle that what makes our games great and why we're excited about creating sports games every year.
And how many different sports games are in the portfolio right now?
Quite a bit. I think from top to bottom, especially with the exception of this year. This year we had a lot of sports games come out. The 3 that most people tend to relate EA Sports with is obviously football or soccer, then football, American football with Madden, and after that, the third sport is really just what kind of extracurriculars you also do in addition to those 2 big ones. But this year, I'm really excited about golf. As a golfer myself, and someone that never thought I'd actually be working on a golf game. This year, we brought EA Sports PGA Tour back and had a new PGA game release after numerous years of not having one. But those are the top 3. But we have everything from NHL, as I mentioned. We have an NHL game come out every year. UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. We have a game that usually comes out every few years. And after that, you can't forget about what we've also done in the world of motorsport. So F1, we release an F1 game with our partners at Codemasters that we've recently had a great partnership with in building some really excellent racing games. And actually, last Friday, I wasn't really involved on day-to-day to this, but I know the team and the critical reception has been really good, is WRC. So the world of rally racing, especially considering the horsepower of some of the gaming consoles today, a lot of that you can really see a lot of that hard work once you put your hands on the controller and play some of those racing games. It's almost like you're just doing a tour of the countries that some of these races are in.
I want to get back to the PGA Tour game because that's how you and I got hooked up in the first place at the PGA show earlier this year. But let me stick with the PR angle. How many people are on the PR team? How many folks does it take to keep track of all that?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact amount of people on working for EA on the PR side. I'd probably say more like 20 to 25 in terms of global managers, coordinators, and specialists that manage a lot of the different global and strategic work that we do. But that doesn't include a ton of different PR agencies worldwide we also work with. So these are the ones that, based out of UK or Germany or France. And they make sure that they handle those local territories for those particular audiences. They may also have a lot better ties, especially with language sometimes being a barrier, to connect press with some local celebrity talent, right? Like for example, our FC game. So we were FIFA last year, and now we're EA Sports FC, EA Sports Football Club. We definitely have quite a bit of brand ambassadors that are pro athletes and pro football players internationally in some of the best ways that we're able to elevate how they think about our game and how they may or may not have had some involvement in its development, is having those local press talk with them, connect a little bit better. So when you combine all of that, it's probably, definitely a few hundred, I'd probably say, all across the world.
Well, according to the website, EA has over 13,000 employees, so you can be forgiven for not knowing every single person who works in PR. Do you know how many active players there are at any given time on all of the different EA games?
I do have that access. Of course, we don't share information like that, proprietary information like that all the time, but we do celebrate quite a bit, and some of them we mention publicly as milestones on how many people are playing our games. For example, UFC 5 we just released a couple of weeks ago. One thing that people don't know is UFC 4, the game that came out a few years prior to it, just eclipsed a little over 23 million players. And that's a lot of players that are interested in the UFC. From what I've told, a lot of those fans and or players also came during the pandemic when it was locked down and people were looking for different sports, kind of like golf. As you obviously know, people, tried to give it their shot at trying new sports as well, and golf is one of them. But 24 million players in UFC 4 is definitely a great way to kind of prove that there's a lot of people interested in that sport, and definitely a lot bigger audience to bring into our new game and show them what the next generation of that particular sport in a fantasy world could look like.
And I had a chance to take a look and play a couple of holes of that game at the PGA show earlier in 2023, which now includes in the game the major championships and the players, among other venues. How much of a process was it to get all the various governing bodies to say yes and be a part of this game?
Well, here at EA, we're obviously the big thing is we're super passionate about bringing the game back, right? And one of the main tenets of us is making sure we're being as authentic as possible for what would the normal golfer expect out of a golf game. As a golfer myself, one of the things that definitely needed to be there was all of the major championships, right? And one of the major championships that hadn't even been in a golf game for the longest time was Augusta National, the Masters. Was at least for me personally, but that was the big thing in making sure that we aligned a lot of their in real life golfing world in line with expectations with our game, and making sure those things were in there. It's not just like putting in the game and saying, oh, we have the Masters in there, check mark, we're just done, and that's all that we need to do. It's definitely about working with all of those individual licensors and partners and making it as painstakingly accurate to the actual real thing. So some of the things that we did throughout development, did multiple trips to many of those locations, many of the actual courses that you're in the game. It had technology. We had helicopters with LiDAR technology. We had drones going over and over again and mapping out the course. So it wasn't exactly us just looking at a picture that was provided by those partners and say, hey, let's go ahead and develop the game and try to do something based on what resources we are given. We went a step above that and made sure that we captured the actual thing with partnership of these individual places, and made sure that it looked as great as we saw it in real life than it is in a video game. Another thing that also was important is EA Sports PGA Tour was a game that was only released for PS5 and Xbox Series X. Those are the S and X, Xbox Series S and X. Those are the latest gaming consoles that are out there. And the reason why we made that decision was a lot of the things that you see in game, and a lot of the complicated physics, the complicated visuals, and the engine that we use to develop those things, none of that would have been possible unless they were on current gen or high def consoles like those I just mentioned. So it's really exciting to go ahead and be sure that you're a big part of those individual things. And as every major tournament started getting closer after the game had released, we definitely had different variants of involvement in promoting the game, whether it be on site, whether it be part of the celebratory activities around the course, and making sure that people understood that what they're seeing in real life was also in our game.
You talked about mapping out the golf courses, and I watched the gameplay trailer for the PGA Tour game earlier today. The amount of preparation and the technology that goes into it is just stunning. And one thing I was really surprised to learn, although I shouldn't be, is that you captured the stances and the swings of almost every single player on tour. How in the world can EA do that? What are the logistics of trying to do that?
In terms of being as accurate as possible to having these golfers' swings, and even some of their things they actually do in the course, right? Certain celebrations, certain facial expressions, all of that stuff, and how we do it is we actually had quite a few of them come to our offices. Some of them actually not even in the office, in an EA office. Some of them we were able to do remote at different facilities. But we did have them come in and do a bunch of different things, from facial scanning to scanning their swing. And those are the things that you actually see in game.
I saw a video of a number of professional players in that scenario where you're trying to capture their body, their swing, their expressions. Is there a name? Is that motion capture? What is the name for that technology?
Yeah, mocap, motion capture for sure. That's probably the easiest way to kind of explain it. There's obviously different tools and different platforms that would complex that answer a little bit. But yeah, we just have them come in, essentially to a room. They go ahead and take our golf club, and we put a bunch of different sensors on both them and the golf club to go ahead and capture that. We have them do it several times to make sure we have an accurate representation that we can replicate in game. And of course, as best as we can, we try to share it with them as well. Let them know what the semi-finished or finished product looks like. And they give us feedback for any tweaks that they want us to do prior to that going live in game.
Is that process the same for all the other sports that are part of the portfolio? How many athletes do you have to do that with?
It usually depends. It usually depends on the game. I think for golf, it was a lot easier, right? Because we don't have, several hundred golfers in the PGA Tour that are, everyone's going to want to play as, right? Of course, the individual deals with each golfer we also have to do as well. So it would be different for like an NHL where you're having like the top players come in, especially the ones that can make it to Vancouver and can do all of that individual motion mocap. We had a couple of big NHL rookies recently come into our Vancouver offices. Vancouver is where we make NHL, FC, and UFC, and have them do motion capture and essentially we would probably tweak that for future years. But there is instances when certain players don't have a chance to do that, right? Especially during a pandemic, it was obviously hard for bringing people in a closed room and imagining them to try to do mocap. So with that, and just kind of like similar to how it was done back in the day, is it's just like a lot of research, a lot of slow-mo, a lot of different things that you can compare to from benchmarking, whether it be a combination of film footage, anything given by the actual athlete themselves, workout training camp footage, all of that stuff is put together, and our designers and animators put that all together to be as realistic as possible, even though they're not actually there in the actual mocap studio, because sometimes that can just be time dependent on the availability of that particular athlete or celebrity's time and schedule.
So what's the time frame we're looking at from start to finish? You have the desire to bring back, for example, the PGA Tour game. How long from the idea to rolling it out?
It really depends on just timing of our marketing teams and the way that we kind of like map out. Obviously, this year was a weird one because so many different sports games came out. Like I mentioned, I think before this call, there's 7 different sports games that I worked on this year, especially around its launch period. But in terms of like EA Sports PGA Tour, it's been 7 years since the last EA golf game, and that was Rory McIlroy back in 2015. So that was the last time that we realistically had a golf game that was being actively developed. And the timing for when we decided to go ahead and make PGA Tour was probably 3 to 4 years ago. We, of course, still needed to do a lot of the groundwork, right? One of the big things is we needed to be sure that the game was going to be ready for the new consoles. And there's a development hurdle there, and making sure that what you're building is also within the same development stack and coding subset for the new consoles. And after that, as you alluded to in the beginning of our talk here, is the individual license and contractual agreements that we needed to do with each major championship tournament organizer, with each golfer, with each course, and also if you had a chance to play it or take a look at some of our trailers as well, all of the individual apparel companies, all of the golf gear, all the different golf balls, golf clubs, apparel, essentially the hats and the vests and all that stuff that everyone's wearing in game, all of that stuff we obviously need a deal with. We need to be sure that we are able to use their product in game, but even more so than that, but also partner on highlighting some of their biggest and latest gear and knowing how to prioritize that within our game as well, for people to go ahead and grind in the game for in-game currency, and they go ahead and purchase that in the store after they've accomplished enough in the game to unlock it.
As someone who is responsible for managing all of these different games, how much technical knowledge are you required to have? And are you in the loop with the developers as the game is being produced?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it isn't necessarily an important thing to know like a lot of the lingo, development lingo. But I frankly feel like it's definitely going to be a little bit harder if you're not a gamer and you're not a fan of the sport, right? Because, a lot of times when we talk about developers, there's things that they want to fix. Hey, we have to fix the size of the divot in the light rough on the 13th hole of this particular course. Like, and if you don't know golf, you're like, what is a divot? Why is that so important? Well, it's important because we don't want to have the golfer seem like he's taken off half of the fairway whenever he hacks at the ball. But I think one thing, at least for me, that's worked really well is not only am I a gamer, I actually used to also be a gaming journalist and be able to critically look at new games and decipher what makes the game great and what makes it not so great. And a lot of those things early on, we work with the devs on messaging to highlight the things that we think that will resonate a lot for players. What are the things that they're going to see the most and enjoy playing with the most? And some of the things that, it's a toss-up. They may or may not like it and might be something that only a certain amount of the players will play. And it's up to us to highlight it in a different way. So we offer different choices for our players to go ahead and decide what they want to do once they jump into our game. I feel like the combination of being a sports fan, knowing a little bit more about golf and why it's so important for each individual tournament and what makes it tick are definitely pluses, not necessarily requirements for the job. But I can tell you what, it's a lot more fun when you can relate a lot of these personal experiences into the stuff I do every single day.
Yeah, you have to be multilingual, don't you? You have to be able to speak sports, especially with these governing bodies, and then turn around to developers and teams that may not have a whole lot of sports knowledge and be able to translate back and forth. Is that pretty close?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important as well to have some sort of semblance of familiarity in what makes a good golf game or what makes a good sports game for that particular sport you're representing as well, right? Because you can go ahead and just because you're working on it, expect that it's the best game ever because it's your own project, and of course you're going to be confident about things that you work on. But also knowing like what the players expect when you play a game for the first time. Is it accessible? Is this going to be the easiest game that someone can pick up? And I can tell you from my experience, he's 5 now, but when my son was 4, we were doing 18-hole matches back and forth because of just how easy it was to swing the club with the joystick, just down and up. Yes, there's complexity in golf, but if just to make it really simple, if you're not really, if you just want to swing at the ball, it's definitely not a tough thing. But yeah, I think having a little bit of knowledge on what makes a golf game great, and having that ability and connecting with devs and understanding their passion is as to why they want to make this improvement. Why do they want to add this particular game mode to the game? Like all of those things make sense once you have that sort of level of knowledge to say, that's one thing that was missing in the last game, or that's something that people wanted in the last game, but we couldn't get it in this time around. Obviously, one thing to highlight for this year's PGA game was the Masters, and that was something that was blatantly missing from a lot of golf games as well. And not only that, but of course, like the 4K-esque visuals, a lot of that stuff, and building a course from the ground up with the right resources that we actually did all the research for was definitely things that were strengths for the game this year.
Who are your constituencies? Who are you dealing with most often, whether it's internal or external with vendors or leagues, etc.?
Yeah, it's definitely brand. Our brand marketing team spends a lot of time of doing the back and forth with our partners, understanding what EA's leadership needs from us or challenges us to consider different angles in hitting new audiences. So a lot of the time, especially on a daily basis, that would probably be our quarterback, if you will, on how to go ahead and strategically think about different campaigns or even different challenges that may arise throughout the game's development. So that usually starts with them. And after that, from there, it's my team, and that includes a community team or social team to understand what players are saying, right? What do they want? What are they concerned about that we should be proactive or even reactive if you want to keep it, if you don't know the full answer yet, we'll just wait and do it reactive. But what do we proactively message out there that will appease some of the topics that they're talking about, whether it be good or bad, right? If they're really having a blast at the game's visuals, then we probably go ahead and huddle and try to give them more. If there's something that they're uncertain of, or say the game breaks and there's something that you just can't do in game, they don't have any other way to kind of to find out what's going on. We proactively monitor that stuff and go ahead and work with the devs directly to say, is this something that happens often? Is more players seeing this bug or whatever it might be? And we go ahead and fix it, reprioritize it, and recommunicate it to our players. Just being sure that we have a pretty open line of communication to be able to see. And yes, we get thousands upon thousands of inquiries a day of ways to improve our game and things that they're also seeing in their own gameplay. But we do honestly look at, we do have a lot of different tools for us to summarize some of those things, and we make sure that we action upon it. And we use different channels, whether it be external channels where everyone can see a little bit of what we're doing, but we also have a small group of players that we call the Design Council, some of the best players playing some of our different franchises. And we also use some private channels that way to communicate with them on what should be done, and making sure that they're a big part of the decision making as well, in terms of things that constantly improve the game, especially after it's out.
That leads me to the next question. You talked about some of the best players in the world. The rise of esports is something that's fascinating to me. And EA has a competitive gaming series for both FIFA and Madden among the sports titles. Players from all over the world can compete for the FIFA eWorld Cup or the Madden NFL Championship. What kind of involvement do you have with those?
The sports PR teams over here at EA are pretty much, unless it's tying to a specific moment in our campaigns, we have a separate team at EA that handles all of our esports. And in fact, they're pretty hard to get a hold of because they're always traveling a lot with all across the globe on the different qualifiers and tournament championships and stuff that are in there. And that's only for one sport, right? Once you attach it to multiple sports, but I'm assuming a good majority of our esports team don't just handle one sport. It could be pretty complicated and of course exciting for them. From what I've seen, and like I said, it's still pretty limited. We actually have a broadcast center here at EA Redwood Shores, Redwood City here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where it's very much like an ESPN-esque TV studio. In fact, even one that could be programmed remotely. If for some reason we have an event here and our studio team is somewhere else, they can essentially still do everything remotely from cameras and lighting and stuff like that. But the reason why I mention it is a lot of times we have our esports qualifiers or even championships. I believe there was a Madden championship here a few weeks ago. And I do see some of those participants come in, and we have a good amount of security and a nice red carpet for them, and they go ahead and sit down, and it's a big live streamed event where you have an audience, and you have sportscasters essentially commentating throughout the entire stream, whether it be broadcasted on TV or broadcasted on a popular stream service like a Twitch, for example. Those things are just kind of show just how hardcore some of our players actually are, right? A lot of them are playing these games hours upon end. But I think the thing that I find really interesting is just the team-based aspects. A lot of these tournaments aren't individual. A lot of them are team-based, meaning to say that one person would need to play one match, win that match, and that wouldn't be the end all. He would still need their teammate to kind of move forward for them as a team to kind of collectively move up. The most exciting things about sports is that you really see a particular set of individuals just work together and give it their all with their bodies, but also collectively celebrate once it's all over and they win the whole thing. And I think we see a lot of that in esports today, and I think you're going to see it for a bunch of years to come, especially as games get more competitive and people just find out that they're just good enough to probably hit that circuit too, and give it another shot to try to make esports a little bit more than just something that you watch, something that they might want to participate in the future as well.
I've had as a previous guest on the podcast a professor at Full Sail University here in Orlando, which has a massive gaming arena on campus, exactly to your point. And those matches are often streamed or televised. It's just a massive addition to the industry. And I think you may have already answered this, but and it's not in your purview, I understand that, but why do you think esports has become so popular, not just as a participatory sport, but as a spectator sport? Where's that coming from?
I honestly, when I played a few games back in the day. I won some national titles for Super Mario Kart way back in the day.
Oh, now you're going back to my day. Okay.
So I mean, I feel like one of the things when I was competing back in the day in like games like Mario Kart and Counter-Strike, what is happening in the world of esports today that I think would have benefited me in the past, honestly, it would be the discovery of different ways and different strategies that some of these pros use, right? Some of them like actually save those strategies until the actual tournament. They like some of them are actually streamers where some of their big secrets, they won't share some of those individual like new ways for, you know, a special goal or a special portion of the map that they'll go into, and maybe they'll give them a distinct advantage. But I think a lot of people watch them not only because they like the competition aspect of it and maybe might be familiar with some of the actual participants that are part of it every year. I actually think they also look to it because they can see some of those advanced strategies, some of those things that they didn't consider through even like the hundreds of hours they've been playing, that, you know, they can be more efficient or they can have an edge over their opponent if they did this. And I think like some of the time that these pro players really spend, you might not be able to see that until the actual tournament itself. So I think a little bit of that has a piece to it, because as a gamer or a player, you could also get a sense of just how much do you really know, right? You might say like you're maybe the greatest Madden player in the world, and after that you see some of these Madden pro players and they do some unique strategies that you never thought of, and after that you go back to yourself and say like, yeah, I could definitely learn from this, and maybe, you know, there's aspects of my game knowledge that I don't have, and by watching this, it really helped me kind of understand why that was viable or why that was more advantageous when I'm against another opponent. So I think that's one unique way, that another reason why people watch these things. It's kind of also another reason why I think people watch Twitch and watch some of these games. Some people can't afford a lot of the games that that are out there. This year especially, it's been a big year for games, and this particular year, I think there's if you were to ask the normal, you know, core gamer and what their favorite game of the year was this year, and a lot of them will give you so many different choices than probably in the last 5 or even the past decade. There's just so many good games this year. So I think people also watch games as a way to also discover exactly how a game plays, how a game looks like, and what the types of emotion that the person streaming exuberates as they kind of play that game. I also feel it's a little bit that too with esports, is they watch it to discover just how exciting it is and how exciting that particular game could be in a competitive, organized tournament, but also discovery for themselves and how they can be better by having, you know, that pro player kind of be their sensei, if you will, indirectly.
You've got a very long history in what we'll call the electronic entertainment industry in video games. What drew you to the field in the first place?
Just me as a gamer. I think I started very early on. I was probably 14 years old, and I was writing game reviews for a few Nintendo websites. And the reason why I did it is by doing it, the website would constantly give me free games. And as a 14-year-old, and even as you get to college, right, it's like we were just talking about this, is this thing, games can be, you can't have them all. I was talking to someone about this today, like even games that you just didn't like back in the day when you were a child, you had to like because that was the only game that you had. And you just, even though you died multiple times, it's the only game you had. You just had to find numerous ways to kind of beat it because you wanted to get more of that piece of entertainment. But for me, it was a little bit of writing and being able to get a game really early, get it for free, critique it, and give it a score. And that made me realize that, this is something I love doing. It never really felt like work. And it was also a great way to get a lot of games at it at the same time. I actually started off working at a Funcoland, which was a mom and pop game store. It had multiple Funcolands around the country, but not a lot. But they were well known for housing retro games. So the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, in addition to the new consoles. And I thought it was just great in high school, just being around video games and just talking to people, and it didn't feel like work. They could ask me numerous questions about different games, and because I usually play them or at least have some knowledge of them, I'd have an enjoyable conversation and telling them why they should buy it for themselves or for their kid or for their parent, whatever it might be. I kind of elevated from there while I was in college as a QA tester for EA. So this is my 10th straight year at EA, but technically I was at EA in 2005, so was that 17, 18 years ago, working as a game tester. So you play the game over and over again to find out the bugs and make sure the game was bug-free upon release. And I got to work on some really good games and some really good franchises like Lord of the Rings, James Bond, Battlefield, Tiger Woods, some of those kind of growing up. And after that, throughout college, I actually found another website that did a lot of different gaming news for different gaming platforms. I found this yet as another way to network in the industry, make it to some really big events called E3, which was the annual, I'd say, gaming party of the year when a lot of the different publishers would showcase their upcoming games for all of the different platforms. And I networked quite a bit. And, I had different stints at Sega, at Konami, Raptor, which is a gaming social network, and eventually got all the way back to EA, doing brand marketing for Star Wars. I was part of the original team for EA Star Wars on bringing back a familiar Star Wars franchise called Battlefront, and got to present and market that game and work alongside some really talented and well-known people in the industry. I one time did a demo of the game for, well, he's not alive anymore, Peter Mayhew, but Chewbacca.
Yeah, sure.
Anthony Daniel C-3PO.
C-3PO, yep.
Ryan Johnson, who was the director of The Last Jedi and a few other major films. I think he's the director of the Knives Out franchise right now. And after that, presented to Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm. And some of those things, like, you just don't think you'd ever be able to do. But I was able to do that, and all eyes were on me and going ahead and presenting why I was excited about our games. But all of that, I'm a little long-winded here, but all of that, the reason how all of that became to be is through the writing as a gaming journalist and kind of writing about what I thought was special to me in the gaming industry. And that's how I built a long-term relationship with he's currently our PR director here at EA. His name is Gino, and someone that I just found at almost every event. We had the same hairdo. We knew the same people. We lived in the same area. Ironically, both of our high schools were rivals, so always came with a dash of teasing as well every time we saw each other. And before you knew it, there was a time at EA where he needed someone to get back into PR, and I was looking for the opportunity to do so. It wasn't specifically for EA Sports, but I knew at some point it could happen that way. and after that, back in the PR, back in the EA side, and continuing to love the games that EA still makes.
To take a view from 30,000 feet, what are some trends in your field, and what do you think the next great leap is for gaming?
Wow, that's a tough one. I honestly feel like the biggest leaps in gaming is when you can get more of your friends and family to play with you. And I think that's a matter of having games that are accessible, games that are digestible and easy to understand. I think that's really, I don't know if there's a tech change, right? We can always like talk about like 20 years ago, did we see things like virtual reality and AR and things like that to kind of take over? At the end of the day, what makes games great is just replayability, accessibility, and after that, just fun, right? And I feel like when we had platforms 15, 20 years ago, we had a few of those things where it made it easy for your family to just jump in and play. And I think that's, well, sports is a little different, right? Sports, you kind of have to like understand the sport to really understand it and enjoy it too, right? So there's a little bit of learning for that one. But in terms of just games in general, I worked on a game called It Takes Two, and actually won the Game Awards, which is kind of like the Oscars of video games, the Game Awards. It won Game of the Year. And one thing that was different in that game versus a lot of other ones similar to it was it was a co-op only game. You had to play the game with another person. You couldn't unless you're really good in holding two controllers and can manage playing that way, which was pretty much literally impossible. You had to find your wife, your girlfriend, your brother, a relative. You can even play them online to go ahead and connect with. I think experiences like that are unique, and it just makes the things a lot more digestible and more fun. Where it isn't the video game as a hobby, it doesn't really necessarily seem like a niche. It's something that anyone can go into. Everyone needs entertainment, and it's a fundamental need, I think, of a human to be entertained by something. And I think the things that really entertain people are things that can be enjoyed in groups, that can be shared, and you're not really the only person that are taking the satisfaction for it.
In just a few seconds, we'll have some closing thoughts on this episode, so stay tuned. If you're enjoying it so far, please consider subscribing or sharing and leave a review. Let me know what you'd like to hear in the future on Media Credentials. First, I want to apologize to Ray. We talked at length about the NBA and his passion for the Golden State Warriors, but I had to cut it for time. I promised him a part 2 where we'd talk nothing but basketball. I got curious when Ray said they used LiDAR to map the course at Augusta National. Depending where you look, LiDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging, or Laser Imaging Detection and Ranging. It's often used to make high-resolution maps with applications in surveying, geography, seismology, and apparently video games. Loved Ray's final point. Entertainment is a fundamental need, and the most entertaining activities are those we can enjoy in groups. Isn't that true? Could be watching a game, could be playing a game. Thanks again for listening to Media Credentials. For examples of my work, including video and audio clips, a blog, and my contact page, check out whitwatson.com.